So now we come to the conclusion of this demo, in which I will give a short overview of what we've done, and then I'll compare our demo scenario with some other scenarios to put it in the right perspective. So here again an overview of what we've done in this demo exercise. First, we created our own enterprise service in the enterprise services repository. We imported it in CAF, and we created a service provider as an application service. Then we published this application service as a web service, and then this web service was consumed in our own custom SAP Netweaver BPM process. Now we can ask ourselves some questions. As you can see, it's quite an elaborate scenario for a fairly simple functionality. Now please bear in mind that in real life the scenarios can become much more complicated, but still we can ask ourselves the question, do we really need the enterprise services repository? And the answer is no. The advantage of the enterprise services repository is that you create a service model which is available centrally, and for which you can create a service provider in a CAF or also in a SAP ECC system, but you don't really have to work with it. You can just as well create your own service in the CAF framework, publish it in the service registry, and work with it like that in the BPM scenario without using the enterprise services repository. Now let's go back to our scenario. The next question we can ask ourselves is, do we really need CAF? So we used CAF to create a service provider implemented in Java, but just as well we can use ABAP to create a service provider. So here we see another scenario in which we could implement the service provider in an R3 system, then publish it just the same in the service registry, and then use this web service in our custom BPM scenario. Now the next question we can ask ourselves is, where is the SAP standard functionality? Because the functionality we implemented here was all custom functionality, but of course we can also integrate it with standard SAP functionality available in the ECC system or in a CRM system or things like that. So this is how that could work. There are two possible scenarios. Bear in mind that in our Netweaver BPM process we used an automated activity. So first we imported the WSDL, and after that we linked this WSDL with an automated activity. So what you could do is you import your WSDL from the enterprise services repository, and when it's time to link it to an actual implementation, you can use a SAP enterprise service which is published in your service registry through a service group. Of course, you can also skip the enterprise services repository and work only with your service registry. Now, final question we can ask ourselves. We worked with SAP Netweaver BPM. Why would we work with SAP Netweaver BPM? Because there are also other BPM technologies from SAP, like the SAP Business Workflow or the CC BPM technology in PI. I wouldn't recommend using the CC BPM technology because it's really meant to work with messages, a high volume of messages, and its primary focus is a high throughput of messages. The focus is not really on human interaction. It is possible, but that's not really what it's used for. You can work with BPM if you want to create a process that spans multiple systems. For example, here we see we have one service published through CAF and another service which is implemented in the ECC system, and we can now create our custom process which uses both services. You can also use SAP Business Workflow for this because it's also works with web services. But Netweaver BPM is a product developed specifically to work with the services and enterprise services. So for the future, I think that will be the way to go. So we come to the conclusion of our demo. To conclude, I would like to refer you to some material on which I based myself to create this demo. First of all, for the modeling in the Enterprise Services repository, I used an e-learning called Enterprise Service Modeling in the Enterprise Services repository. So just go to SDN, you type in the name and you find the e-learning. Another e-learning I used was for the CAF part. It's called Provisioning Enterprise Services with CAF. So again, you can find this on SDN. Now for the BPM part, I based myself on several articles. For example, the article series written by G. Deng called Building a Composite Business Process from Scratch with SAP Netweaver Business Process Management. If you first start out, I recommend you have a look at the article by Donka Dimitrova called SAP Netweaver Business Process Management End-to-End Process Implementation Sample. For the configuration of the automated activity, I looked at the article by Srinivasan Subya called Creating BPM Process with Human and Automated Activities. And if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I also recommend you read the article The New SOA Configuration Approach by Alexander Zubev. So now we are at the end of our demo. Thanks for your attention, and I wish you a lot of success with your future SAP Netweaver BPM projects.